out to our participants online. I think we've got a nice representation there from the virtual platform, but also welcome to all of you who are joining us in person today. So before we kickstart our conversation, let me just give you a little bit of announcements and some house rules. The event is being recorded, and we hope that this is okay for everyone. It will be run in English, but a few of our speakers may be making their interventions in other language. So we have simultaneous interpretations in Arabic, English, French, Spanish, Russian, and Chinese. And thanks in advance to our interpreters there for making this possible for us. And to our speakers, not all our participants and not all participants and attendees are native English speakers. So we would like to request you to kindly speak a little bit slowly so people are able to also understand fully those key important messages that you are delivering. And to our speakers, please be mindful of time. You have 5 minutes to maximum to make your interventions. And we really want to make sure that we have ample time for the conversation towards the end of today. And to our online speakers, kindly make sure that your names are reflected in your login and also your organizations for ease of reference. It's always good to know who's around on the table. And also kindly use the chat box for the questions that you may have. Our colleague Mateus here will be monitoring and tracking those questions, which we'll be picking up later at the end, towards the end, and feed into our discussion. And our apologies in advance if we are unable to entertain all the questions you have, but we'll cover as much as we can. Now, on the subject of this side event, there is an increasing awareness that our food systems are in crisis and are not prepared to withstand expected shocks. Major and rapid transformation is imperative. COVID has tested the limits of our food systems, especially those dependent on global supply chains. It has also exposed and exacerbated the inequalities that profoundly affect the most vulnerable. Growing occurrences of climate change-induced disasters continue to test the resilience of many food systems, with extreme weather events becoming the new normal. The current war in Ukraine, once again, demonstrates a vulnerability of concentrated and excessively specialized value chains, throwing the world into major and interconnected fertilizer, fuel, and food price crises with enormous consequences for the years ahead. In this moment of increased instability, we also see the strengthening and proliferation of initiatives aiming to address some of these challenges. The global food systems landscape is vast, and it is expanding, from renewed calls to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals to ongoing climate negotiations, and from the new UN crisis response group on food, energy, and finance to dynamic engagement of the Committee on World Food Security and hundreds of alliances, coalitions, consortia, platforms, and movements. As private entities serving public goods, philanthropic foundations have been called to contribute to addressing the growing challenges of disrupted food systems. Of course, foundations are not new. They existed in ancient civilizations of the Middle East, Greece, and Rome. Plato's Academy, for instance, was established with an endowment that helped to sustain its existence for some 900 years. The Islamic world developed Waqf as early as the 7th century. Many large foundations were established in the 19th and 20th centuries, usually originated from the fortunes of wealthy industrialists. Foundations have good purposes. They have broad purposes and great freedom of action, including the ability of many to conduct programs worldwide. But of course, not all foundations are the same. There are community foundations, which are supported by donors and are located in specific community or region, addressing local specific issues. There are operating foundations which carry out projects with their own staff, and there are independent foundations established by wealthy individuals and families. Foundations can take risks. They can continue in funding exploratory research in the same way that they can support community-led initiatives, building local capacities, supporting marginalized stakeholders. They have the flexibility to respond to the needs of these communities, and their funding can trigger further support. They can also play as brokers and conveners of different actors in an effort to foster certain causes. In other words, foundations have the privilege, the responsibility, and the opportunity to leverage resources and networks to advance sustainable food systems on the political, economic, social, and environmental agenda, bringing wealth, influence, access, power, and privilege to the table. Foundations play a distinct role in advancing food systems transformation. Uncertainty and unpredictability are two common ingredients in these crises. And the state of the world today, be it COVID, conflict, or climate change, demonstrates how entangled these issues are. So for this morning's side event, we are gathered together to tackle how foundations are shaping the response to food crisis with a view to contribute to the CFS through the new Philanthropic Foundations Mechanism. The event is divided into three parts. Part one is a sharing session on how philanthropic foundations are responding in times of crisis. The second will be a discussion on how Philanthropic Foundation Mechanism can contribute to CFS. And part three is our Q&A session. So let's move on to the first segment of the session. Our first discussant is Mr. Neil Watkins, Deputy Director from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Welcome, Neil. And Neil, just the first question here. What has been the Gates Foundation's response to date to the current food crisis? And how has this changed or is changing the Foundation's approach to grant making?
Great, thanks. Thanks very much, Oliver. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. And the Gates Foundation has served on the advisory committee of the Committee on Food Security for the past 10 years or so. And we really believe in the CFS and its mission to address food security, but its critical role that it plays in bringing so many stakeholders together in an inclusive way. And I think just to get into it, I'll answer your question, but I think we're also just really excited to have more philanthropic interest and to partner with the Global Alliance and the Agroecology Fund on this new effort. But on your question on the food crisis, I mean, I think we heard yesterday from many speakers about the urgency, the reality that is unfolding around the world and at country level, even as some global prices of commodities go down, at country level, the impacts are enormous already. There's a potential for famine for the first time in a decade. So I think we're very aware that the situation is grave and that there needs to be a lot more action and focus on what can be done. I'll say a little bit about how we as the Gates Foundation are responding and then sort of turn to my colleagues. But I think first, for a little bit of context for those that don't know, the Gates Foundation it's a nonprofit. It's a family foundation, obviously put together by our founders, Bill and Melinda Gates, back around the year 2000. We're not affiliated with Microsoft or other companies. We're actually an independent nonprofit philanthropy. And we work, mostly people know the foundation for the work in global health, but actually we have large programs. In fact, one of our largest programs is in agricultural development. So we've been supporting partners in Africa, South Asia, innovators, new research on agriculture and nutrition for the past 15 years or so. And in nutrition, we really focus on those critical first 1,000 days. We work with movements like the Sun Movement, which our esteemed panelist, Greta Verberg, leads to actually really drive attention to child nutrition. And we also work on nutritious food systems. How do you actually change the food system so that it really includes more nutrition? And then in agriculture, we work on a strategy which we call inclusive country-led agricultural transformation, which is really about how do we get increased incomes, productivity, nutritional outcomes, and women's empowerment for smallholder farmers across Africa and Asia. And we work with great partners around the world on that. But I think in reflecting, we also felt like this existing work we were doing was not enough by any means, and that this current crisis required more, that we needed to do more. So last month at our Goalkeepers event, which we organize at the UN General Assembly each year, we announced another $100 million in new funding from the foundation specifically to address the current food crisis. And our angle on it is that the humanitarian needs are super important, and there are many working and funding in this area, but we tend as a private foundation to focus on how do you actually change the long-term issues, and like Oliver was saying, address the food system, the need for resilience. So how do we actually respond to the crisis, but do so in a way that does set up the kind of long-term resilience that's needed. So some of the examples of the new investments we're making, one is to the GAFSP, the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, which many of you will know, but was founded at the last food crisis and really responds directly to governments in Africa, South Asia, with their needs. So there's a special call for proposals that's going out now to governments from GAFSP that we're happy to contribute to. We're supporting an African-led effort around livestock, a UN Women initiative around women's empowerment, and then some efforts to address the crisis of fertilizer access and affordability in Africa. There's some estimates that next year you could actually have 30% less production in Africa because the price of fertilizer is so high and impossible for farmers on the continent to access. And then just one other example, we're contributing to a new fund coordinated by UNICEF called the Child Nutrition Fund, which is designed to address wasting and immediate needs there, but also critically try to prevent wasting in the future. So I'll just say that's a few things, but it's really a drop in the bucket compared to the need, given what we all know of this crisis. So philanthropy can't replace the critical role of governments and others coming in, but we hope to signal to other donors some of the urgency and some of the areas that might require investment. The last thing I'd say is, I think there's a real opportunity in this crisis, or not even an opportunity, a requirement, I think, that we figure out how to work together in a different way and collaborate with organizations, people that maybe we don't always agree with. And I think when you have a crisis, coming together across those kind of lines is really extra essential. So we actually, with this new mechanism, we hope we can do a few things. It's crowd in more philanthropic resources to address these issues, both overall and at the Committee on Food Security, because we think the CFS is such an important institution, but also maybe there's an opportunity here to model how actually working across lines where we don't always agree can be possible. So, I think working, the three groups that are starting this, we don't agree on everything. We don't have the same position on everything, but we do agree that the CFS is important as a place to have these discussions. And we also agree that the food crisis that's developing the world is really urgent, and we need to work together to address it. So I think that's a good starting point, and I'm excited about where it can go. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Neil. That's very important. And speaking of collaboration, we have also Daniel Moss from Agroecology Fund, which is a multi-donor fund that supports just and sustainable food systems. It's a network of 40 plus active funders who are collectively awarded around 10 million to 170 organizations over 40 countries. So they're crowdfunding to be able to support some funds, to develop funds and mobilize funds for agroecology. Daniel, unfortunately, won't be able to join us today, but he has sent us a short video just to make sure that, we see him and we hear their initiatives. Over to you, Daniel.
Hello, good morning. My name is Daniel Moss, a co-director of the Agroecology Fund. The Agroecology Fund has been honored to engage with the Committee on World Food Security since we formed as a donor pool to support agroecology movements back in 2012. We are a network representing over 40 philanthropic foundations from Europe, United States, and Asia. We're members of the Agroecology Donors Group, as well as the newly formed Agroecology Coalition. The backbone of the Agroecology Fund's guiding principles are the FAO's 10 elements and 13 principles of agroecology. We have found that the consultative processes that created these pillars of agroecology to be both galvanizing and influential to governments, civil society, and philanthropy alike. Many of our grantees are active participants in the civil society mechanism of the CFS, as well as engage with FAO processes in their home countries. For this reason, because the CFS governance is so inclusive and the body plays such a critical role in advancing global policy debates on food systems, we're thrilled to participate in the new Philanthropic Foundations Mechanism. Not only do we look forward to working with our colleagues from across multiple sectors, both governmental and non-governmental, to debate voluntary policy recommendations and transformational narratives, but more generally, we look forward to sharing perspectives and learning from one another. We do not believe that philanthropy should lead these policy debates. The Agroecology Fund's members have collectively contributed tens of millions of dollars to grassroots processes to scale agroecological food systems across territories and strengthen participatory research. Our grantee partners represent Indigenous peoples, smallholder farmers, women, youth, Afro-descendants, consumers, and much more. Through trust-based philanthropy, we learn from these essential frontline actors. Although we do not speak for them, we look forward to sharing their insights and aspirations through the Philanthropic Foundations Mechanism. We're committed to ensuring that the CFS remain a highly inclusive participatory forum where all voices are welcome in our collective endeavor to strengthen truly just and sustainable food systems. We look forward to our collaboration with colleagues within the CFS community and are grateful for the opportunity to do so. Thank you so much.
So you just heard from Daniel Moss from Agroecology Fund. So AEF is one of the three coordinating organizations of the PFM. Now I turn over to my colleague Mateus. Mateus, in 2 minutes, could you share with us some approaches taken by some of our Global Alliance members in response to the current crisis? And then maybe you could also, at some point, also tell us a little bit more about this PFM. How is it expected to work? And yeah, the rationale behind it.
Sure.
Over.
All right, thank you, Oliver. Maybe I can very quickly just recap what the Global Alliance is, and then I will jump to your question. So the Global Alliance is a network of philanthropic organizations. We have currently 28 members, and a little bit different from our colleagues from the Agroecology Fund, we're not exactly a pool fund, so we are not grant makers. And our unique contribution is really to work together to convene food system actors, to convene dialogues, just to stimulate local and global action for transformational change. We have a very diverse membership. We have from small family trusts to large foundations coming from Europe, North America, South Asia. These 28 foundations are then connected to a very extended network of grant recipients, collaborators, and partners, which are counted by thousands of organizations. And what really unites us are 7 principles: that we acknowledge food systems are not delivering the aspirations that the global community needs, as we saw yesterday by the alarming numbers of food insecurity, and also the failures in terms of inclusivity, sustainability, and resilience. So people in this alliance are really committed to deeply transform food systems with a systemic approach. So your question, Oliver, we consulted with the foundations what they are doing differently in these times of urgency. And interesting enough, they brought a number of important lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic crisis that we're still facing, but was very severe a couple of years ago. They noted, for example, that these foundations, very few of them do operate in direct emergency situations. But most of their granting, most of their work, most of their collaboration does work on resilience building, mostly looking at the long term. They did change a bit of the way of how they operate, and in this crisis, they became much more flexible. Their grant making was pretty much accelerated on the speed of trust, like they said. And this was carried forward until today, which is affecting grant making today. So for example, some foundations, they have reported about small and flexible grants for rapid assistance during the COVID-19 moment. And these flexible mechanisms are being carried out today. Few foundations do operate in direct emergency assistance. They have very much been strongly involved in school feeding programs, support to humanitarian organizations. But overall, all of them have acknowledged, I would say, it's something that has been in our debates for a long time already, that there is a systemic failure of concentrated global supply chains to offer food security stability. So many of them are supporting local food systems linked to their resilience building programs. There's one particular research by one of the foundations member of us, Rockefeller. I think it's interesting to bring this on. They did research and they found, for example, that antitrust and where antitrust and competitive legislation was stronger, they observed a less acute surge in the food prices during this crisis. This is explained by the fact that more competition has refrained certain food actors to capture the moment of the crisis and the profits during the crisis. So this is an important lesson for deconcentrating food chains. And about the Philanthropic Foundations Mechanism, this is a new body that we are joining forces with Bill Melinda Gates Foundation and the Agroecology Fund. We aim to coordinate the participation of the philanthropic sector in the CFS. Some activities we will try to facilitate input from private philanthropic foundations to negotiations, consultations, contributions to the high-level panel of experts, contribution to the CFS overall decision-making, participation in intersessional activities, and obviously the plenary. We're all participating right now. It is being founded by these three organizations and their networks, initially by these three, but participation, it's something that we are interested to hear from other colleagues if they would like also to join this endeavor. For us, the Global Alliance, we do recognize that the CFS, it's not only a very important intergovernmental platform for global policy coordination and inclusive intergovernmental platform, but we also see the CFS as a global food governance forum. We are so close to Foro Romano. There is a definition of forum in Latin, which says it's a multi-purpose, centrally located open area that serves as a public gathering place. And there's a modern definition saying it's a medium where ideas and views of a particular issue can be exchanged. So we do believe the CFS can play this role as a forum or where a plurality of perspectives are met. This is in line with our constituting principles, and we believe this plurality of perspectives instigate innovation, experimentation, lessons learning, exchange, solution to all participants. Second, we also observe that there is plurality within the philanthropic sector itself. We believe that this mechanism can assist the transmission of these perspectives to the CFS debates. As said before by my colleagues, we have diversity within our own network, and we have diversity of opinions within the three constituting organizations. So we intend to keep this PFM, this mechanism, open to private foundations that are aligned with the transformation that we want to see. And we are still going to learn how to work together, but it has been a commitment from the two organizations to go in this route. Finally, my final point, and this is aligned with what's said by Daniel. We believe the philanthropic sector should always play a supportive role. Philanthropies can provide support, most and overall, to members, to other organizations, to implement their ideas for problem solving. This will be our approach here, to support the CFS, to support members, and to support other participants.
Thank you, Theus, for that. I know that all of you and many of you would have questions, but please continue writing them in the chat box, and we'll open the floor a little bit later as well for our participants here in person. We'll be moving towards the second part of the questions of the session. I'm turning over the floor to Gerda Verber, coordinator of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, who will be moderating the next segment. Over to you, Gerda.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It is great to see you because it's like meeting friends again. Some of you, it's 3 years ago, but the more important because we have a very important topic at stake here. And at least I would like to learn more about this Philanthropic Foundations Mechanism. And of course, we heard a little bit from Matthäus, already a little bit of explanation, but I cannot imagine that there are not more questions or more challenges to respond to. And maybe these philanthropic foundations are able to lead the way to more investors and supporters at country level to align behind food systems and food systems pathways, and to really guide and concretely support the transition. The thing we have heard so much about yesterday, all the needs of countries to get country-led and country-owned solutions. Of course, not only the government is as an owner, but all stakeholders involved, smallholder farmers, women farmers, small and medium-sized enterprises, communities, schools, etc. And it's all there. And we hope to get it out in the next 45 minutes. So thank you very much. Bear with me. We have people following on Zoom, and they will, of course, submit their questions. But I would like to invite you, who have come so early to the FAO buildings, to be ready to ask a question. We have 3 people on the podium, and you are counting with me. You only see 2, of course, but Ambassador Yaya, we all know him. He will walk in his own pace, and he will also contribute, hopefully from a country perspective, because that is what needed. And of course, CFS is the most inclusive platform, but nothing will change if nothing is changing at country level. So it's not the governance, it's not the coming together, it's not the forum that's doing the thing, it is working together at grassroots. And here you also are able to recognize my Sun Movement colors. Having said this, we are extremely happy to have Ambassador Mario Arvelo. No need to further introduction because he's also a previous chair, and we were already able to especially applaud him yesterday when the Director General of FAO introduced him. Next to him, we have Rick White. He is the chair of the private sector mechanism, but already for many years, and then Ambassador Yaya. I would like you to ask you, listening to this, what could it mean at country level? And please focus on the action on the ground that is needed, because hunger and malnutrition is everywhere. First, please, Mario. Before I give the floor to Mario, I would like to say we have 3 people in our panel, but we also invited a representative of the civil society and Indigenous people mechanism. Very pity to hear that this person was not available, but looking around, I can see many representatives of civil society and Indigenous peoples mechanism. So I hope and account that you will come forward with a very sharp question or remark. Mario, the floor is yours for the next 1 or 2 minutes.
Thank you, Gerda, and thank you for everyone here and listening in from online. I would like to bring a perspective. Of course, I am here as a country representative for the Dominican Republic, but also a perspective, like Gerda said, from a former CFS chair, but also from a former COAG chair, that's the Committee on Agriculture. And why would I make that distinction? Because COAG is a purely intergovernmental body. That means that only government representatives sit and participate. CFS is different. And it's different why? Because in 2009, there was a revolution within the UN system, opening up the doors for non-governmental actors. That meant that civil society was welcomed, the private sector, philanthropic foundations, and so many other relevant actors. And a high-level panel of experts was created, and so on. These doors were opened. And if any of us, and I was here by 2009, if any of us would have explained this dynamic to our colleagues before that time, they would not have believed it. Simply put. And there were many colleagues, and Gerda will remember, and Yaya for sure, that said that they would oppose to have anyone from any such arrangement as a civil society or private sector or any of the other research entities and so on, sitting alongside government representatives, because this was the UN, and there's the UN Charter, and it's the sovereignty of member states, and so on and so forth. Now, things changed at that moment in time, and things have changed again now, because we are opening up the doors once more in the CFS to a philanthropic foundations mechanism. And I know that I do not have much time. I could speak for hours on end on this, but I will finish my brief intervention by saying that this is but one step forward in our long walk to really having a platform that is inclusive in an absolute manner. We still need other mechanisms, and the philanthropic societies are showing the way. We need to have the parliamentarians, we need to have academics, we need to have so many other instances for true participation and true inclusivity, and the existing mechanisms still need to open up further. Thank you, Gerda.
Very good. Thank you very much. I told you so this gentleman, give him the floor and he can speak for hours. But the beauty of this meeting is that we want to have interaction, and you did very well. Thank you so much. Ambassador Yaya, we have already introduced you. We have praised you. We didn't predict whether you were wearing a hat, but now we can witness ourselves. But I have already concluded that you're looking younger every year. We are looking for the perspective from countries or from partners, from farmers, because we're talking here about the crisis after the COVID crisis and what needs to happen, not only at the global level of CFS, but at country level, the thing that we have heard so much about. But to give you the time to adapt the atmosphere here in the room, I first give the floor to Mr. Rick White. You have the floor, sir.
And thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and welcome to everyone, and congratulations on this new approach. As past chair of the private sector mechanism, I had the honor to serve as vice chair of the Food System Summit Champion Network. Am I close enough now?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I'll lean in because I'm not nearly as loud as Mario. So there is no better time now than to welcome more development actors such as the philanthropic organizations to the CFS multi-stakeholder platform. At this, as this year's State of Food Insecurity report has shown, we are dangerously off track to deliver the Sustainable Development Agenda. And to this end, we need all actors to work together through partnerships, but built on principles and values and a shared vision of the CFS. Together, let's focus on food and nutrition security for the whole world. There is no one size fits all solution to tackle hunger, and we agree that philanthropic foundations play an important role in development, not only in mobilizing financial resources, but also as development actors in their own right. We are so pleased the Committee on Food Security as a multi-stakeholder platform is welcoming to all sectors and actors, including the philanthropic one. We really appreciate the level of activities from this sector and the potential for impact. As a result, it is a pleasure to see the mechanism built up, and we hope that there will be continued growing engagement in the CFS amongst all the sectors and all the constituencies. And we appreciate philanthropy's leadership in this next generation. Many philanthropic organizations were born from the private sector activities and have a unique and special role to play within CFS. And it is good to know the profits from businesses can ultimately be deployed to support development work in a not-for-profit manner. And this unique combination is a very important feature of food development. We look forward to understanding in greater detail the processes through which different and varied categories of stakeholders can have space within the philanthropic mechanism. And we very, very much look forward to working together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But before you close, I would like to ask you from your perspective, not here in Rome and not as chair of PSM, but in the private sector, in your country or in your region. Listening to, for instance, very concrete examples of Neil Watkins on opening up to specific things, and they were kind of summarized by Matthäus. When it comes to making starting material available and more affordable at the country level, and also fertilize, what kind of concrete actions do you want to see from this philanthropic, or in kind data, knowledge sharing? I don't know. What do you see is needed?
Great question. I think what's really needed is
depends on your answer, sir.
Noted. You know, I think at the end of the day, there was a mention that we need to learn. We're learning how to work together with philanthropy. I think we need to speed that up real quick. We need to really get together and learn how to be effective, efficient, and get things happening on the ground for action, because the world is in crisis in many, many areas. And so it is, I think, imperative that we need to get this sorted out real quick in terms of how we work together, how we trust each other, how we talk together, more importantly, how we get action on the ground where it is needed. I come from Canada. We have a lot of food and opportunity to feed the world, and we do. The problem is it doesn't get to the right places all the time, and we need philanthropy and programs to help the private sector deliver into those sensitive areas that need help the most, and we need to trust each other to do that.
Right. Thank you so much. Now we're going further and coming together. As coordinator of the Sun Movement, we are extremely happy to also have Nigeria as one of our members. And everybody knows that Ambassador Yaya is the ambassador of Nigeria, also a former CFS chair, but he's not wearing his hat of CFS chair today. So we call upon him as ambassador of Nigeria. I know that many countries, many governments are asking, can you please align behind the food systems pathways that we ourselves have developed and not come in with what you have to offer or supply? How can this philanthropic mechanism, how can it help to align behind the government? And if philanthropic foundations can do it, why not international development banks? Why not donors? Why not other investors? So can philanthropic, and how do you envisage this in your beautiful, important, but also big country in need? Nigeria, Ambassador, please.
Thank you so much, moderator. My co-chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
You see, in my village, if you greet somebody and he doesn't answer, he's not happy with
Did
you.
it already, Ambassador.
Now, thank you, Chair. Let me start from the perspective of history. I want to congratulate Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for stopping being the only child in CFS. And 2 other foundations have joined them. And I think that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It took 10 years. Is it 10? Yeah. 10 years to get that done. But once it's done, many, many more will join. My emphasis will start from here, that don't leave it to international foundations alone. In my country, Nigeria, you have foundations that you can pull in that will be part and parcel of not only working on Nigeria, but also serving the whole of Africa in conjunction with you. I won't name names because I know you know them. Now, let me please, just say this because it's key. History is one of the things we love. In 2008, faced by similar challenges as the one we are now observing today, the reform of CFS greatly energized the committee. With the participation of more voices, actors, and perspectives supporting members, we were able to make great progress in the number of critical issues for food security in nutrition, such as the VGGT that I had the honor to chair 10 years ago. It is very welcome that the 3 organizations here are communicating, and the constitution of this mechanism to coordinate the actions of philanthropic section of the CFS. And we all have one thing to do, and that is, like my colleague on the left said, 1, trust each other. 2, not necessarily looking for money, but diving into the way that the philanthropic organizations operate, learn from each other, drop things that are not progressive in different cultures. My country has one advantage, and I will sing it loud and clear. Not only are we blessed with an ecological range of mangrove forests to the desert and everything in between, we have a variety of people of different culture, different understanding, but educated. On the other hand, we have diversity in food. Where are we internationally when it comes to the orphan crops in developing countries, and particularly in Africa? They don't need additional thing other than to improve them and make them, they're adaptable already to the environment, and publicize it. So that takes care of better nutrition, not only for the developing world, but also for the developed world to take care of obesity and things like that. There is need to move away from having just 5 crops. And when weather is not in their favor, the whole world begins to sneeze. You know the crops. Where are the tubers? Where are the plantains and other crops? Improvement on them is needful, but they are there. The combination of food is also there. Look at the case of quinoa. It was a successful propaganda, no, not propaganda, successful action to encourage nutrition. But do the people who grow it, do they eat it? No, they sold it. And malnutrition continues. We have been caged by ourselves because we disrespect nature. I think this is time for us to respect nature and improve our health, improve our environment, and also improve our lives. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Yaya. And here's the summary of what is said. CFS is opening up even more, making the revolution from only government sitting at the table to open up for multi-stakeholders, now even towards a philanthropic mechanism or foundations, and maybe more to be expected. From the perspective of Mr. White, we need to be able to talk to each other, to identify the demands, the questions, the needs, and then collaborate based on principles. I would like to dig out a little bit more the principles to Ambassador Yaya, who said, look at what is happening in our country. Let us finally learn the lessons from 2008. Did we really learn the lessons from 2008? And he gives some examples from a farmer's perspective or a producer's perspective, and also focusing, but very diplomatic and indirect, from not only science driven, but also have the conversation with farmers about orphan crops and how to improve them. Because only by having this conversation and collaboration, you are able to have the smart solutions that fit both the nutrition of people, the need of farmers to make a decent price and produce a good crop, but also to serve society, doing it in a biodiverse and climate smart way. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely proud to declare the floor opened for questions. We invite people at Zoom to come in with questions. We invite people at Zoom to identify themselves. We have already one question, but please give us your background. Where are you coming from? Which country? And then come forward with a clear, punchy question so that we can challenge every member of this panel, because we have 6 members in this panel. Let's make best use of them. But focus on a potential way forward and how you think such a philanthropic mechanism can work, foundations mechanism. Right, I open the floor and I am ready to take 3 questions. And as said, I have already 1 question in front of me. Yes, I see one. Can I have one more hand? I want to have a gender balanced approach because I make a lot of noise here, but the podium is not very gender balanced. No ladies this morning asking questions? Yes, sir, I've noted your, yeah, very good. We have 2 questions. Sir, your name, background, and then please your question.
Thank you. My name is Olawole Olagbaju. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a dairy farmer. I'm a researcher, and I'm also a member of a private sector mechanism. I have 3 quick questions. Number 1, how will more funding support be assigned to developing countries, especially Africa? Number 2, would there be any mechanism in place to identify and collaborate or engage young people or young people organization who are into developmental projects of great impact on food security? Number 3, how can a private SME like mine from Nigeria who is into dairy development activity benefit from philanthropic effort? Thank you.
These kind of questions, very direct, very to the point. Thank you so much. People are writing here and start to sweat for your information. Madam, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning to all. Marie-Laure Creta from Switzerland. I think it's very good to hear the diversity you want to have in these new mechanisms. At the same time, I'm wondering how you're going to have a common vision. You mentioned that all of your different organizations, they want to transform food system, but from the experience we have with some of the members, I've got the impression the vision on what is transformation and how to do it is quite different. So how are you going to address this challenge and come with, I guess, a kind of a common position? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also a very good, no, I shouldn't judge this. Thank you very much. Clear question. Then we have one question through Zoom, and we will have time for plenty, because as punchy as the questions are, as direct and sharp will be the answers, hopefully. We also have a question through Zoom from Judith Kabeta or Beka, and the question is there is an international researcher in Montpellier, and this person wants to do a research on synthetic fertilizer, and where on which door to knock when it comes to this philanthropic foundation mechanism. Right, let me start with Neil Watkins and then give the floor to Matthäus. And then I ask this panel, because you need to reflect critically to see whether you have something to add or suggest. Neil.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, great questions. Ola from Nigeria, thanks very much. And it's great to hear your questions. I think definitely, certainly at our foundation, we have a strong Africa focus, and I think definitely hear your push on engaging youth. I think that's something that all of us can do better in our grant making, and so I think that's an absolutely critical point. And then just on your last point, maybe we can chat briefly afterwards. We'd love to learn more about the work you're doing. We certainly do invest in livestock as an important driver of not only economic opportunity for African small scale producers, but also a nutrition, important source of nutrition. And so would love to learn more about your work. And then maybe also, and my colleagues will probably answer here in their own way, but I think Maria, you absolutely noted the diversity in this new mechanism. And I think we're very early in this and committed to figuring it out, but we don't have an answer. I don't think we've come to say we have a shared vision or we've done that work, but we have said we'd like to come together to work across different points of view and see if we can do something that's helpful. So that's not a non-answer, it's just an honest answer that we're early on this road, and we'd actually welcome your advice and ideas on how we do that. And then maybe on the fertilizer one, I'm not totally clear on the question, but I think it's an important issue right now. Maybe I just make two comments. One is, I think there's a short-term issue and a medium to long-term issue around fertilizer use. And I know it's a very, tricky issue, but right now there's a real urgent problem, which I think people are aware of, which is that the price of fertilizer, because of so many things, has gone up so very high. It really does threaten production of crops in the coming planting season, right now in sub-Saharan Africa in particular. So I think there's one thing of how do we make sure that there isn't what could be a 30% reduction in production this year in the short term, which does involve, frankly, using existing input processes, while thinking about what's that transition over the next medium term to move to more, use innovation to move to different approaches to fertilizer, so that it's not, it's not something that is causing, as widespread and causing negative effects. And I think innovation can help there. And I think there needs to be maybe a little bit more of a nuanced discussion. For example, in my country, fertilizer use is more like 250 kgs per hectare. In Africa, it's less than 20 in many countries. So it's not African countries that are driving the large amounts of fertilizer use. It is countries in the north. So I think we should just keep that in perspective too. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Neil. There is one question that has not been answered yet, which is the question, will the focus be on Africa? Will the focus be more on African countries?
That's a good one, but maybe I will start with the easy ones and then I jump to that one. No, the easy one, I will start first, the one from Maria from Switzerland. As Neil said, I think one of the intentions to constitute this mechanism is to see where consensus is possible. I think that's a clear vision. What we still don't have the answer yet is how we're going to operationalize that. I think the commitment is here right now, and we are identifying topics where we see convergence, but it's our understanding that we would not need a mechanism which will only diverge. So that's why we're constituting this process. So it's a question that we still don't have a clear answer, but there is for sure an intention to work on that direction. I want maybe to just correct a bit the question on the fertilizer. It's my fault, Gerda, because I was the one supposedly to write you the question. You probably didn't understand my letter, which is terrible. So maybe I can just read out the question from our colleague. She was asking, due to the fertilizer price crisis, lack of foreign currency, many African countries are making efforts to decrease their dependency on synthetic fertilizers. One of their strategies to produce locally organic fertilizers. Do one of the donors present here support this initiative? And yes, how? Yes, both the Agroecology Fund and us, the Global Alliance, we are a member of the Agroecology Coalition, which was formed after the Food System Summit. This coalition, according to our view, is taking shape, and there are a number of African countries, African member countries joining this initiative. There are resources coming from the European Commission. So this is one of the initiatives, one of the groups that we are investing a lot of our efforts. I think this is completely aligned with the question. It's the intention of this Agroecology Coalition exactly.
Wait. Are country governments joining? Or?
Yeah.
All right. So this mechanism is also open for to governments.
Yes, it's Agroecology Coalition. It's open to governments.
Ah, okay. It's not the mechanism. It's your.
No.
Ah, okay.
The Agroecology Coalition was. Formed.
Yeah. No. You were clear about this. Yeah.
And yes, we're engaged on this. I think it's aligned with the answer of yes, looking at the long-term transition towards agroecology as a way to reduce the dependency on synthetic fertilizers.
Thank you very much. I don't want to get more confusion here, because we are here talking about the mechanism, the philanthropic mechanism. So let's focus on this, and very much to be pragmatic and flexible. If you get a question that is not too long, I will give you the floor to read it out, because it's a quite different perspective of how we. Mario, you wanted to jump in.
Yes, absolutely, Gerda. Very quickly. The questions are very interesting. Going beyond Africa, as foundations come into CFS, they come into the UN, and that means leaving no one behind. You will always hear from a Dominican representative in these kinds of fora, that there should not be a priority on a particular continent or on the poorest of the poor, but on a needs basis. As long as there is one individual who is hungry or malnourished anywhere in this world, the work of CFS should affect that person. That's one point. On common vision, Maria, of course, we should aim not necessarily, of course, having a common vision, yes, but there's such thing as the wisdom of crowds. And when you get two people together, you get certain wisdom. When you get three, you get better, 4, 5, 6. So that's what the secret sauce of inclusivity means. Participatory to the fullest extent possible. There was a lot of criticism about the Food System Summit, about how it was hijacked, some of my colleagues say, by the private sector. And what did the civil society do about that? Well, they ran the other way. Some of them did. So there was a breakup. Several faces from civil society showed up. Some didn't. And that hurt civil society and the world at large. Now, UN is the most diverse club possible because it encompasses most of the self-governing territories in the world. So you have that vision there that is crystallized by participation fully. And lastly, Gerda, the foundations. The foundations have a great clout because the Philanthropic Foundations, contrary to what many people think, they are not some arrangement to throw money at problems. And Neil was very clear about that. This is not, the Gates Foundation is not Microsoft. It is an arm of corporate social responsibility out of course, a very successful enterprise. But when Bill Gates or Mr. Mars or the Rockefeller people call politicians and decision makers, their calls are taken and what they have to say is heard. So that's very important. So welcome foundations and welcome everyone else into CFS.
Thank you very much. I'm thinking of somebody, CEO, calling the prime minister or the president of a country, and what happens then. But this is aside or for beyond this meeting. Second round. I cannot imagine there are not more people who would like to take the floor here in the room or Madam, who else would like to take the floor? Madam, I give you the floor and come on, ladies and gentlemen, this is the opportunity to shape the vision and the way of working and the need and the principles maybe, and the actions that are needed at country level to frame them. So we should help them because they were organizing this on purpose. I'm quite sure to get input for their vision and consensus building. Madam, you get the floor, then your gentleman, and then we have a question here.
Thank you. Jennifer Chow with the Environmental Defense Fund from the United States. I'm really interested in the orphan crop discussion, and some assumptions I feel are that the top 4 to 5 crops really reflect current commercial interests, efficiency at scale. And if orphan crops are, in many cases, more nutritious, more naturally adaptive to changing climate, more nurturing of local communities, how do we overcome some of these economic dynamics that have shaped, decades of the reason why we have these top 4 to 5 crops and this structure? Some actions for the immediate future would be really interesting. Thank you.
Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Joe Yates from the Agroecology, Nutrition and Health Academy. I just wanted to ponder and ask the panel about, since most philanthropics are born in the North, many from, as Rick was saying, born from private companies, many of whom are not just small scale, but they're large, very large companies. And I know they're not associated, but there's this disparity between where these foundations are born and then often the populations that are at risk they're trying to help. And I just wanted to know, since there's a growing recognition that the problems of our food systems are not immediate, they're immediate, but they've got roots that are deep and go back a long way, many of which are based around concentration of power and crops and things like that. I wanted to know how committed is this group to truly transforming, overhauling food systems, not simply quick fixes that sort of follow the trajectory we've been on until now. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Good morning. My name is Abul Azad. I'm from the 50 by 2030 initiative.
Say it again, please. You're
My name is Abul Azad from 50 by 2030 initiative.
Okay, yeah.
Question is like before a bit of background. So to address the food security crisis or to improve on agriculture productivity, it is very important that policies and decisions are evidence informed, right? But unfortunately, agriculture sector around the world is the least informed sector. Now, my question to Neil is that you mentioned about this $100 million commitment to address new food crisis through GAP-SP, but GAP-SP actually does not have the data as one of the priority areas. National planning is, but not necessarily data. So, I mean, are you, going to work a bit on that? So a quick, a question on that. Thank you.
Very much. Then we have also one more question from Zoom, and participants here and at Zoom, you might regret because this is the final round. So if you want to have any other business question, you have to ask it now. Mateus, please.
I can read the question. It's from the CSM, Escola Campesina, and it's a comment actually. This is exactly multi-stakeholderism, where foundations are considered equal as representatives of small-scale farmers through CSIPM. I would like to take that question if you allow me, Gerda. I'd like to answer that one.
Yeah.
Right now?
Yes, please. Why don't
Okay.
you start?
No, it's just to politely disagree with the comment. I think it's not our intentions to represent anyone. I think this is something that we discussed yesterday. We're not representing people. We are, according to many relevant actors in the food landscape. And it's not our intention to produce mechanisms that would have the structures and the capacity that the CSIPM has and the PSM has. I think our intention here is really to coordinate where consensus is possible. So I don't think we are considered as equal representatives. We're not representatives. I think it's really contributors, which would probably frame better our role here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let me translate this a little bit, also reminding everyone here in the room and at Zoom that we had invited the representative of the civil society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism to be here and to be a co-shaper of potential principles, ways of working, consensus building, etc. So I think the invitation is still open, and I can only advise the civil society mechanism, please take the opportunity to change the perspectives and the way of working. Two questions about how to prevent following vested interests and also the truly transition and not just quick fixes. Neil, Mateus, Neil. Yeah, hot potato, this one.
No, some great questions. I'm glad we're getting into the meat of the discussion. Jennifer, to your question, I think it's a super important one. Just speaking for the Gates Foundation, we do work on a number of I don't know if you call them orphan crops, but not necessarily only the top four or the largest, things like cassava, sorghum, other crops in Africa that are important for the economic life of African economies. But I think you make a good point that, the issue is how do you make some of these other orphan crops more economically viable? I don't think we have the answer to that, but are certainly interested in research or analysis that you and your team are doing around that, because I think it's a super important area. I think on the question from Joe from the Agriculture, Nutrition and Health Academy, totally agree. And I think maybe I would build on what Matteo said. We are, I think, acknowledging that a lot of the foundations here come from the North, come from private wealth. There's a disparity. So I don't think we claim to try to obfuscate that or say it's anything different. But try to use that in some way, the privilege and the resources to support good efforts. And so please tell us how we can do that better. I think some of the things around investing in long-term resilience. As a philanthropy, we can invest in different ways. We can take risks. We can fail because, it's not taxpayer money. It's a different kind of money. So, I think push us and tell us where we should be taking risks. And I hope that's the tone of this panel, is tell us what we should, give us ideas that we can do. We do try to operate, I think, on the basis of good ideas. And then Abel from 50 by 30, just fully agree. And I think the issues around supporting governments are more than just providing funding, but actually helping. I think the 50 by 30 initiative is a great example of this, supporting governments to build capacity of their own ability to collect data, to produce that data, and then to use that data for decision making, right? If you don't know what kind of crops you're producing, or whether women farmers are benefiting, or whether the nutritional quality is good, how are you going to make national decisions? So I think that's why this current data work stream of the CFS is really important. And initiatives like 50 by 30, which for those that don't know, is trying to support governments that want to get by 2030, 50 countries to have regular agriculture surveys and censuses that enable governments to know what they're actually, what decisions they can make based on that data. So it's a really important initiative. It will also critically help us track progress towards SDG 2, which right now, I think it's a little bit of a source of embarrassment for us as food security people, because we actually can't tell you if we're on track to meet SDG 2.3 or 2.4, which is to double farmer productivity and income sustainably by 2030. That's a huge goal. So initiatives like this, I think, are an example of how partners and countries are working together to try to tackle.
Thank you so much. We're running out of time. That's always the same. But let me start with inviting Ambassador Yaya to have a 1-minute final observation or message.
One, the orphan crop. The University of California, Davis is working with the African Union at the African Plant Breeding Academy in Ecraft, Nairobi. Number one action that could be done. FAO is supposed to be part and parcel of that, but I think they've dropped the ball. So let CFS, let the foundations bring that up with the DG and everybody, that go back to it to make life better for everybody. Two, I almost froze here when I heard that inorganic fertilizer should be funded. I chaired the agroecological and other innovative approaches. Let us go back to the basics. I know it sounds primitive, but it's very, very nature friendly. You get value for money, but it's hard work. Composting, and then you integrate both plant and animal together and improve and reduce the methane losses that is affecting our health and our environment.
Thank you very much. And give Ambassador Yaya a big hand, please. Mistake from my side, because we should do it all in one, because it all takes time. Rick White, you have the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you, and I'll be quick. Yeah, we're so excited about the philanthropic mechanism coming into play here, and but I am cautious about, I wouldn't say concerned, but not, aware of. We are aware of the philosophical differences that will come into play. We have to get by those philosophical differences, because those philosophies all too often stand in the way of feeding people. Philosophies don't feed people, food does. And we got to get by that. And we need to work together. We're going to have differences of opinion, whether it's synthetic fertilizer and what you think about it or not. We need it. We need it to grow food. We need it to be greener. I agree with that, and work is being done. And so I think things like that, we just need to get through it. But at the end of the day, we need action on the ground and not just get bogged down in differences of opinion. So please, please, let's make the most effective use of this opportunity before us here to do things on the ground that make a difference in people's lives and feed them during these crises. Thank you.
Rick White, Mario, please, Ambassador Mario.
Thank you, Gerda, and thank you, everyone. 13 years ago.
1 minute.
13 years ago, CFS opened these doors to actors other than governments. What did that mean? That meant that governments realized, acknowledged, admitted, submitted to the reality that they did not have all the answers. That we, I'm a government representative, did not have all the answers in terms of fighting hunger and malnutrition successfully. And that's why civil society came in, the private sector, and all of the other actors, including the philanthropic foundations. Now we have a foundations mechanism. And this was done because there was some wisdom, and that wisdom defeated some degree of political cowardice. And we still have a measure of that still going around. The doors keep opening. They should be kept open. If governments said, we are not going to monopolize CFS anymore, then that means that actors that have come into the door are even more obliged to keep those doors open. So openness, transparency, participation, inclusivity. Go CFS.
Go. Oh. Wait, you all get a big hand right now, including US participants and the people from Zoom. But first allow me to thank you very much for being in this event and for participating in such an active way. Let me make a few concluding remarks. First of all, I think we can conclude that this is a great initiative that has to be shaped further, because as was already recognized, it is not there yet. It's needed to go through the friction and the debate and the heated debates to develop a vision and a consensus, and to have a principle-based platform. And that is very much important, and make these principles public, because this will serve the inclusivity. The point is that there is a need or request to move beyond vested interest and not going for quick wins, but be truly there to support the transition that is needed. For instance, science-based is okay, but also validate the local wisdom, the basic wisdom, the farmer's wisdom, where Ambassador Yaya has talked about. This is not only about funding, also have the observation of what foundations have, what they have. Can they deliver data and align data to have a reliable data system, knowledge, capacity strengthening, technology? What be demanding would be my suggestion vis-a-vis this mechanism. It could help. Don't ask them, what do you have to offer? It's not only funding, they have much more, but demand and express the needs of countries or participant stakeholders at country level who are really working to transform the food systems. And focus on the perspective from where you come, you be a farmer, women food producer, SMEs, consumers, community, schools, etc., and get your demand right. Then I think there is also something that alignment at the country level should be alignment behind the national or regional or local food systems stakeholders, because they have invested and developed a lot when it comes to food systems dialogues. As we know, 140 countries have submitted their national food systems pathways, and they are looking for the opportunity to invest, find short-term solutions that can support long-term objectives and not going into the contrary direction. And finally, I think the foundations, but also the people in the consensus, need to be able to leave logos, egos, and priorities at the door in order to have a real conversation on what is needed on the ground from the perspective of the communities and cities and people, families out there. So finally, a personal wish. Please feel invited to contribute to the further design of this platform. It's promising, and I keep a close eye on you, because if we can learn from the philanthropic foundations on how to nudge donors and investors to much more align behind government investment plans, then we certainly will, because gosh, donors and investors are still so siloed, just as foundations still are. Finally, I think you should promise all participants here that you have a post box or an email box so that they can reach out to you if in case they have brilliant ideas coming over throughout this day. And my final remark is CFS is proving that it is not only the most inclusive platform, but that it's now really willing to not going upstream only, but also going downstream and look at things from the national people's perspective. And that is what we need. Thank you for being here, participating in an active way. Give the whole panel and all the organizers and all the participants at Zoom and yourself a big hand, and all the best during the rest of this CFS.
Chair, postscript. Ladies and gentlemen, CFS is going places. Having 3 past chairpersons of CFS in the room, I think is something we should celebrate.